Thanks for all the great questions. Brandon Diamond is coming up. Just for the rest of our session, we wanted to continue thinking about this approach that Pete just set up, which was how do we deal with some of the subsidies that are being produced by humans for raven control. So Brandon Diamond is the Area 16 CPW area wildlife manager. He's a good old graduate from Western State Colorado University, and has been with CPW ever since 1999, I think, when you graduated. Started out as a DWM, became a terrestrial biologist, back to DWM, and now he's the area wildlife manager. So Brandon is one of my favorite people on the front lines of wildlife conservation. He's just such a dedicated, amazing, passionate person. So we're grateful to have him here. And he's going to start just a summary and conversation about some of the work that's being done in the Gunnison Basin on trying to deal with those human subsidies for ravens. And then also we'll look into the future a little bit about where that program can expand.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Pat, for that introduction. It's great to be up here. It's great turnout. This gives me a lot of hope to see you all here engaged and interested. You know, this type of collaboration and communication is how we're going to continue our path forward with legitimate Gunnison sage grouse conservation, which is now more important than ever. Dr. Coates just set the stage really well for this portion of our conversation, and that's really what this is. Take some of the science and the statistics aside and just talk about on-the-ground management that can potentially benefit grouse. This conversation goes way back in Gunnison County, and what we want to talk about today is some of these subsidies that Dr. Coates was referencing, because I think, you know, this, as I listened to him talk, it sort of highlighted the urgency of the situation with corvids, and I think there's some nexus to mammals as well, and some of the subsidies we provide for them, which we can circle back to at the end here. But we certainly have these issues in the Gunnison Basin, and I think of my kids, and I think of conversations where we talk about how do we eat an elephant, and it's one bite at a time. So I think this is a great way to talk about that, and how do we eat at these subsidies one bite at a time. So in Gunnison, we're somewhat unique, but probably not all that unique, in that we have major highways that bisect sage grouse habitat. And so over the years, certainly our vehicle traffic has increased, which has led to all sorts of conversations on many fronts. Particularly as a wildlife manager, we talk about wildlife vehicle collisions, human health and safety, preserving migration corridors, all these things that we all talk about in our professions, and we're experiencing them all here. So roadkill is something that we've been talking about for a long time, and the issues continue to have more urgency, in my opinion. At the same time, of course, a lot of you have been engaged in Gunnison sage grouse conversations and management for a long time, as have I, and we've sort of watched the evolution of the anthropogenic influences across the landscape. The Gunnison County landfill is one place where we've talked a lot about subsidy for corvids in particular, and in fact, I don't have the stats or the dates or anything presently. Some folks, Nathan Seward might, but the Gunnison County landfill has done prescribed corvid control at the landfill over the years. I'm not sure what level of efficacy that's resulted in, but it's been something that we've been talking about for a long time. So recently, and the reason we're bringing this up is because I feel like we're starting to gain a little bit of momentum in our local worlds, in our local collaborations on this issue. So over the last 5 years, we've had several winters in the Gunnison Basin where roadkill has been significant. It's always more significant than you'd like to see it as a wildlife manager, but we've had a few that were extra significant. And I guess at the end of the day, CDOT and others, Parks and Wildlife gets called to roadkill animals, especially if the animals aren't killed and we have to deal with a crippled animal. But everybody's talking about roadkill. And so what came from that was CDOT, particularly during one winter a few years ago, they were looking for a place to dispose of carcasses. So we have lots of deer and elk laying on the highways, and they needed to figure out where to put them. So a short-term solution for them, they were looking for places that were sort of out of view of the public, places where there was some room, where they could pick up roadkills from across the highway system and deliver them to these places where they could dump them off the highway and put them kind of out of sight, out of mind. I give credit to, we had a local landowner east of Gunnison, and she brought this issue to all of our attention, mainly because her dogs were getting out there and rolling around in it and bringing nasty stuff back to her house. And she said, please, can we figure out a different solution for this, which was definitely warranted in that case. So on the heels of that, I talked with her, she was talking with the county. I ended up talking with Marlene Crosby, who's our county manager, and Marlene's great. She's always interested in wildlife issues. And after we discussed this issue, Marlene said, well, maybe we can figure out a way to subsidize. CDOT can bring carcasses to our landfill and we'll give you a discounted rate. And I think for a lot of years, the issue was that CDOT would have done that, but it costs a lot of money, particularly during those winters where we have substantial roadkill. So Marlene brought that to the forefront. We had a meeting with the Board of County Commissioners. So again, credit goes to our BOCC here in Gunnison County, always looking to do good. And they approved a subsidized rate for bringing roadkill to our Gunnison County landfill. It does come at a cost to CDOT in terms of manpower and staff time. But at least we had an ability to take those carcasses to the landfill. We had a plan when they arrived, they could dig holes and bury them. And then that was a much better situation than leaving dead carcasses across the landscape or consolidating them in certain dump sites. So this, over my years in the Gunnison Basin, when I was biologist, I used to do a lot of helicopter surveys, and there were lots of places, particularly around on the fringes of ranch lands, working ranches, where I would run into big concentrations of corvids, coyotes, and things like that. And I think we're starting to talk about that next level of our carcass management, because at the end of the day, I think we all agree that roadkills certainly are a major subsidy for our corvid populations and other predators of Gunnison sage grouse and or greater sage grouse. So there's that. But one of the things that we wanted to, and I'll let Pat tell me when the time is right, but we've started to talk about in earnest potentially creating sort of a carcass disposal subsidy program for our working ranches here in Gunnison too. Because oftentimes, they're adjacent to our really high quality Gunnison sage grouse habitat where we have active leks, we have broodering and nesting habitat, we have everything going there adjacent to the ranches. And if we can figure out a way to make it easy for agricultural producers to dispose of carcasses at the landfill where they can be buried and disposed of versus dead pits, which traditionally a lot of ranches have. And honestly, Parks and Wildlife has had over the years too, to dispose of all the carcasses we come into contact with. But so anyway, step one was having this conversation, getting it to the county, getting it through with all our collaborators. We have a plan now in place where CDOT has a mechanism to dispose of roadkill carcasses along the highway. And for those of you that haven't been to Gunnison, if you drive, once you get into the basin proper, coming off of Monarch Pass, I mean, literally all the way to the dam at Blue Mesa, we have high value Gunnison sage grouse habitat. So anywhere along the Highway 50 corridor where we have subsidies in the form of roadkills is certainly contributing to the potential for raven predation on our adjacent grouse habitat. So I think it's something meaningful that we're starting to tackle in earnest. Last year, not 21, 22, but 2021, I think CDOT brought nearly 100 carcasses to the Gunnison County landfill at a discounted rate. So that's a lot of pounds of meat unavailable to scavenging predators and corvids. This last year, kind of an interesting story, CPW is in the middle of a mountain lion density estimation project here in Gunnison. So CDOT was actually bringing the carcass to our office and dumping them for bait for mountain lions. Marlene was like, why is CDOT not bringing carcasses to the landfill? And we were like, oh, time out. They were bringing them to us at our request. So our numbers were down a little bit for this winter, but we have that ability to do that now. So fast forward a little bit. Are we ready to talk about the ag lands, Pat? Or do you want to focus? Okay. So I just wanted to put this out there too, and I give big credit to Nathan Seward and the Gunnison Sage Grouse Strategic Committee. Again, the next step is talking to our working ranches, and this is very preliminary in concept. We haven't got to where we want to be. In a perfect world, I think our vision is to have sort of an on-call employee, whether it's for the county or whether it's for Parks and Wildlife or I don't know what, but we have an on-call person that has a truck and a trailer equipped with a hoist and a boom where they could load up a dead horse or a dead bull or whatever, and ranchers could kind of have that person on call. We could get to their ranch, load up the dead animal, call the landfill, get out to the landfill and dispose of them at the landfill at a discounted rate. That would be kind of the pie in the sky vision. Nathan Seward and the Southwest Terrestrial section in CPW has already committed essentially to the funding for our CCA certificate of inclusion holders. And so the folks that are enrolled in the CCA program, at some point, I think Nate's going to roll out a letter to them offering this up to them if we can figure out kind of the logistics of it. But again, I think, this sounds very simple, but for an on-the-ground manager all of this is always floating around in the back of my mind. I really feel like we could get some net benefit for sage grouse from implementing these things. We just need to figure out the logistics and the funding sources, and it would help us on a lot of different fronts. And so I might stop there, Pat, if you have anything to add, and then we can kind of circle back to 10 years from now.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Brandon. I just wanted to say two quick things. We just have 5 minutes left, and I did want to give a chance for people to ask questions if they have any. But we also have Cinnamon Levi Flynn. Can you stand up there? There she is. From CDOT here, and appreciate her cooperation and providing a little bit of data to us. We don't have time to talk about it right now, but yeah, when we look at this partnership, we've really got 4 key partners and then a potential 5th partner, which I think will be a really interesting piece of this. And so it's CPW, Gunnison County, CDOT, and the ranchers, if they're interested in engaging in this. And then there's another potential partner, which could be interesting for also thinking about opportunities for young people, especially that want to find a way to be engaged and to help, is some sort of entrepreneur who creates a business to carry out what Brandon was just talking about, which would be going around and collecting carcasses and hauling them out into a safe place. Another thing that we just recently heard about, and I think Nate had this knowledge and passed it on to Brandon, and he passed it on to me, was up in Montana. They're doing a composting project where they do a similar thing where they go around and grab carcasses and then they bring them back to a specific place where they do composting. And then they use the products of that compost to start new compost pits, apparently. So our Heart of the Rockies man who's coming up here shortly, they're a partner in that program as well. So, but anyway, Brandon, did you want to say something else about mammals or other predators? Yes,
thanks, Pat, and thanks, Cinnamon, for all your collaboration over the years. We really appreciate it, and CDOT's help on all these issues. The last piece I would just throw out there is I think this is a timely discussion on several fronts, and we're here to talk about grouse and celebrate grouse, but I think there's another species coming to Colorado here shortly that is of interest to a lot of folks, and that is the gray wolf. And I think that, as far as like this subsidy discussion and, the proximity to working ranches and things like that, I think this is a good time for us to start talking about this type of program because, wolves will also benefit from subsidies potentially too. And I think if we can work out these programs to get carcasses to landfills, it'll have more benefits than just a sage grouse. So I think I wanted to point that out. And we'll continue to have these conversations. But I know there's several working ranchers in the room, we'd love to talk more about it and keep moving forward on this, because again, I think it'll be meaningful to grouse conservation and other conservation.
I think we have time maybe for just one question. We got Amy here.
Thanks, Brandon. I was just curious, around Montrose, another problem we have is hunters dumping carcasses, legs all over the place. Is there any, I don't know if you have that same problem here, is there any kind of effort to educate that community to not be dumping? And I know the BLM has signs up all around Montrose saying don't dump, but then they just dump right in front of the sign.
Yeah, that's a great point, Amy. Every little bit helps. I think some folks in the room have been engaged with the city of Gunnison, and also its towns and what subsidies towns are providing. So I think we need to look at this sort of holistically across jurisdictions, and where we can gain some net benefit, I think we should try, or at least engage in those conversations. Hunters, I guess the easier we can make it for them to dispose of carcasses, that would probably be a step in the right direction. I don't know how to do that, but it's a good point.